They try to replicate native feeling content, and they get 6 people into a room, 7 people into a room, and they write their UGC script, and then they send it through legal, and then they do it over and over. It's written all over the page that this is not from an authentic creator.
Absolutely. So if you're over scripting people, of course, there's always going to be some compliance with some brands that you need to follow. But if you're overdoing that, you're just basically shooting yourself in the foot with what you're originally trying to accomplish, right?
What's up, everybody, and welcome to Growth Mentors, the podcast where we share snackable growth hacks, strategies, and best practices in how to drive maximum marketing impact and grow your bottom line. I'm your host, Matt LeBlanc, and today we're going to be talking about the number one creative wall that I see brands hitting when marketing on social media. Our guest today is Gemma Schaefer, and like me, Gemma is a creative director at Jump 450. She is a die-hard fan of the Philadelphia Eagles and an entrepreneur in her own right. She is the founder of the women's swimwear brand, American Mimosa. How you doing, Gemma?
I'm great, Matt. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Very, very excited to talk to you. So I feel like the topic today is sort of near and dear to both of our hearts. Yeah,
definitely.
So Gemma and I, both creative directors at a performance marketing agency, and so we're kind of having this conversation a lot with different clients who are sort of trying to negotiate. How do they show up on social media? How do they advertise themselves on social media, right? So just to cut to the heart of this idea, the number one creative wall that I see brands hitting when they're trying to market on social media is that they are not willing to adapt to the environment, right? Aesthetically, tonally. Gemma, let's unpack this together, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. I think starting out too, it's funny because as creative directors, we work with so many different kinds of brands. So today we're going to be talking about everything, right? So startups we work with, big luxury brands we've worked with, D2C, all of that, B2B, all of these great kinds of companies that all use the same type of digital advertising, right? So we kind of have to come to a common ground on Facebook, YouTube, all of these channels. And what you consider brand and how you run your ads can really affect your advertising.
Absolutely. I think that, to just speak in general terms, something that I see a lot of brands do is the things that they want to run on social media are too polished. They look too much like advertisements. And sort of the argument becomes a lot of internal brand creative teams kind of dig their heels in about how they want to show up on social media. And so the argument becomes ironclad brand identity versus, the ever-changing, sometimes scrappy, brutally authentic trends of social media.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely also a control issue too. So when I'd say most of the time we see this with really high-end brands or, again, people who take their brand identity really seriously, which isn't a negative thing at all. But when it translates to where you're running your ads, especially social media, it's where you need to have a little bit more flexibility. You can't control the internet. If we could control the algorithm and how iOS enables advertisers to target people, we'd be having a totally different conversation. So I think even starting out, it's really important for people listening to understand how that actually works. So when we're creating ads for brands and we're putting that out into the atmosphere of the internet, having control and wanting to only show really high brand assets, really polished assets that you're kind of referring to, what you're really doing is limiting your creative testing and limiting the styles that people can see and convert on, right? So when you make an ad and you throw it out into the wild, platforms show that ad to people based on early signals like click-through rate, right? So if you're only showing one type of style or one type of angle, you're limiting the amount of people and pockets of people that can actually convert on your creative.
Absolutely. I feel like you put that really well, much better than I. You kind of hit on something for me there. You were talking about control and how, brands want to be in control of their own identity, but, it is not a negative thing, but it is maybe sort of the same thing as when you meet a person who wants to be too in control of their identity or too in control of how they come off, right? And it's like, it's always that balance. Is like, we all want to show up in a certain way. We all present a certain way that we find appropriate for ourselves, right? But when you see somebody who's hanging on too tightly to the idea, it comes off as disingenuous. No one wants to see a brand's idea of themselves. You know what I mean? They want to still feel some authenticity there.
It's so crazy too, because that exact point is driven by fear, right? So a lot of these brands will come to us and say, oh, well, user generated content doesn't fit our brand. We don't want to cheapen our brand by showing maybe something that's more trendy looking, something that fits into the internet. But it's really driven by fear, because they have this idea of their purchaser that's going to be driven away by that kind of tactic or that kind of creative strategy. When in reality, like I mentioned, different people are always going to engage with different creative. You might have two very different people with the same purchasing power that are going to resonate with different types of creative. So that's why Jump is so awesome, not to plug ourselves too much, but we use the data to show that. So when brands come to us with that fear and that control issue of not wanting to try these different styles, when we run our ads, we're able to show them, hey, this is what our conversions look like with different audiences, with a static image, with a price angle versus a video with a convenience angle. I think when people break it down that way and can actually see who their audience actually is, it's really enlightening, because it opens your mind to, okay, who is actually converting, not even converting, who's resonating with the story. We're all creative people. We love hearing, like, what's the story of, what we're creating? We're telling the story in different ways so that different people can understand that message.
Absolutely. So Gemma, I just, before we get too far into the conversation, I kind of wanted to sort of point out that you kind of sit at in a unique seat of this conversation, right? Because while you are a creative director at Jump and sort of negotiating with brands to sort of maybe in marketing, you're also a founder of your own company. You're also establishing your own brand identity, right? And so you've done some advertising on social media there, and I feel like that just gives you this kind of like vantage point to sort of really see both sides.
Yeah, definitely. I think I love to talk about how I even got into advertising. So I got a master's in global fashion enterprise. And when I originally got into this, I had this kind of traditional idea of what fashion meant. So this will relate to advertising in the aspect that if you can understand the landscape that you're working in, you're going to be able to market and brand so much more effectively when you understand what you're actually up against. So for me, it actually took traveling all over China to understand how the traditional fashion calendar and fast fashion was affecting my advertising, right? So just like these brands we're talking about who are very traditional and maybe stuck in their ways, maybe from that print perspective and old school advertising perspective, that's how a lot of fashion companies were at the time when I broke into the industry, right? So they were working with traditional calendars. They weren't used to having the internet as a vehicle for their marketing. So after seeing everything from the supply chain of it, the factories of it, how that translates into ads in the internet, it completely blew my mind and opened my mind to how this actually affects any kind of brand who's in it, whether you're fashion, whether you're selling cleaning products, whether you're, whatever you're selling. Understanding that landscape is going to help you understand ultimately how and when you can talk to the people. And social media is key, right? Everyone's on it. Whether you're any kind of brand, if you're not utilizing it, you're kind of putting yourself behind, which kind of just goes back to what we've just been talking about this whole time, right? Understanding who is on the internet, not being afraid to embrace that, because even if it doesn't match up with your brand necessarily right away, let the data talk for you, right? See how you can talk to these people through different styles and then use that to your advantage, basically.
Yes. And specifically, if you are a challenger brand, in my opinion, this isn't even really a question of, do I take on this strategy? If you're somebody who's trying to fight your way into an industry, who's fighting, companies who are much larger for you, for customers, this is the edge that you need.
It's actually I love talking about the fear as someone who started, with no followers, with nothing from organic and advertising. social is the best advantage you can have. So when I first started, it was everyone in fashion was Instagram, Instagram, Instagram. That was the main thing people were pushing. But during COVID, as we know, right before COVID, TikTok became explosive. So one of the best things I did as a small business was not only start engaging with people on that platform, but using the way that algorithm works, which is completely different from Facebook, to help drive my sales. And within, I would say, 2 years, I had dominated sales through TikTok over the 6-8 years I had been on Instagram. So although it was a little deflating and you kind of feel like you wasted your time, at the same time you realize, okay, I wasn't adapting and changing with these platforms, and I was just limiting myself and the amount of people I could reach.
Absolutely. Yes. That's what a great example too. To just speak to the kind of fear angle, the perspective that a lot of businesses might be missing. When you're advertising on social media, you're not just competing against your direct competitors' ads, right? You're competing against every other piece of content on the internet. You're competing against late night clips and your friend's vacation photos and a creator's really cool video that has already gotten 3 million views. You're more just in the business of grabbing eyeballs. Yeah.
Absolutely. People see there's some sort of crazy stat like 10,000 pieces of content a day. And even though we're in the industry and we're working in it and we're seeing even more than that, the general person, like you're saying, you're competing with grandma's dinner on Facebook or Instagram with your ads plus everyone else's ads. So when we talk about that limiting and almost like tunnel vision that brands have with how they want to show themselves, you have 3 seconds to do it. So in performance marketing specifically, you'll hear catchy things like scroll stopping and things like that. But those are the tactics we use to make sure you even have a chance at your customer getting to the ultimate place, like a landing page or somewhere they can purchase or subscribe or whatever that conversion is that you're looking for. Which I also think, too, is something we tell brands all the time when they're struggling with letting go of that brand identity and being a little more flexible with using trends and user-generated content. They have to remember there's no portfolio that is live of your ads. Of course, you have ad libraries, but I think getting them to also understand that these are just things your customers are seeing for that split second. If you're able to get them to click on that to go to that landing page, your landing page can be as beautiful as you want it to be, right? You can make it as branded and as luxury as you want it to be. But if you want them to get there, you ultimately have to get them to stop the scroll and click on that advertisement.
It's like scrolling on social media is like driving past a billboard on the highway. You know, you only have a couple seconds to grab that attention. The reality, I think, is that no one really wants to be watching ads. No one really wants to be looking at your ad. You know, we're on there to be entertained or to be educated. So you really only have a little bit of time in your ad even to kind of show, hey, I might be selling you something, but I'm also going to entertain or educate you. We've all become such masters at detecting the inauthentic. People don't trust big companies. You know, a lot of people don't trust government and big business. People are trusting the sort of word of other people, right? The testimonials, and which is why social proof is so powerful in what we do.
Couldn't agree more. I also think we're kind of entering an even more unique time with this style where it's been around long enough where the authenticity is almost expected to the point of people are realizing, oh, wait, this is a paid actor testimonial. So it's even more challenging while you're creating things for your brand. Because you're competing against so much fake stuff out there as well, which isn't necessarily, you know, we're in advertising. Advertising is always, even with TV, traditionally, it's actors. But that's one thing I love about you, Matt. You come from an acting background. So I think when you're helping people embrace what's authentic to them and showing that in different styles, like as an actor, you have really good experience with that and pretty much tactics that kind of relate across the board.
You just really made me think we're kind of in a time now where we're talking about the nuance with this, right? It's not just social proof or testimonial. These things have become so common. Maybe not every person's eye has become as trained as maybe yours or mine, who, you know, we're working in marketing and so are sort of keenly trained to that kind of thing. But I do think that it's a lot more widespread than that. I think that people really can pick up on, was this a paid actor, or the way somebody says something that sort of gives them away as, oh, this is actually a brand talking to me.
So true. I think some good tips for anyone listening as well who might be thinking, okay, this is kind of me. I want to get into this. I want to embrace what my brand looks like on social. If you're nervous about the acting part of it or the inauthentic qualities of it, whitelisting with creators is a fabulous way for you to start kind of dipping your toe in the water, right? So what that actually entails is taking a creator or an influencer who resonates with your brand in whatever way it is. So if we're talking swimwear, you might find a fitness person, a model, someone who is lifestyle oriented, travel oriented, who makes sense with the audience insights you have already, whether that's your organic social or if you're working with an agency, tapping into your Google Insights. And then having them run user-generated content or strip down ads through their profile. It works really well, and it gives you a great idea, okay, this is working, this isn't. You can kind of replicate what that creator does in paid ads, or you can continue on that whitelisting route and running ads through similar creators.
A very small detail of kind of what you're saying is when you're scrolling through social media and you see something at the top that says sponsored versus something at the top that looks like it's somebody's profile, like it's an actual creator or influencer. I think as viewers of social media, we don't always even realize that we're clocking those things, but we are. And I do believe that that's one of the reasons that whitelisting can be so effective. I think that you have a lot of brands that sort of are dipping a toe into this conversation or this kind of pool that we're talking about here. And so what they do is they try to replicate native feeling content, and they get 6 people into a room, 7 people into a room, and they write their UGC script, and then they send it through legal, and then they do it over and over, and they basically, like, by the end, it's written all over the page that this is not from an authentic creator.
Absolutely. And I think that is why I always suggest starting with these types of influencers first, because you have to, when you're talking about releasing control, letting them speak through their own voice. Nobody knows their voice like they do, and their followers follow them for a reason, right? So if you're over scripting people, if you're over, of course, there's always going to be some compliance with some brands that you need to follow.
Of
but
course.
If you're overdoing that, you're just basically shooting yourself in the foot with what you're originally trying to accomplish, right? And that kind of goes back to user-generated content is a spectrum. There's so many different styles. There's so many different types that you can do that I can't tell you how many times we've kicked off calls with brands at Jump, and you bring up the word UGC and you just see everyone in the room be like, oh, because they think it's automatically gonna look like garbage, or, you know, some person made on TikTok with a fuzzy green screen, which, you know, they're not wrong, but some of our best ads are on that far end of the spectrum of UGC, and some of them are on the complete opposite side. So one style that's been working really, really well for some of my clients across the board is stripping everything off, not taking the native text off, just having a voiceover or a creator speaking selfie style to the phone, no kinetic text, no Instagram story text, nothing like that, no end cards, no logos, nothing in your face, which kind of gives the same approach of that whitelisting where you're not necessarily seeing sponsored by. Because again, the internet, people are sick of it. They're seeing it every single day. So the more that you can fit into the flow of their feed, but again, while also scroll stopping, it will work. It will work.
No, that's such a great point. I think that, I mean, like, not to speak against, pulling levers like kinetic text or that kind of thing, because I do think that it does still work in instances, right? But we're also sort of seeing an evolution of this, of replicating this kind of like user-generated content, whereas now we're sort of seeing it evolve away, and it's like less is more. You know, you can tell when somebody's trying too hard with a piece of content.
Definitely. And again, leaning into the personality of your brand and understanding that purchasing power you have with the people you work with.
I wanted to give us just a little bit of context here. Quite honestly, it maybe feels a little out of place in the conversation now, but I do think that it's notable to mention. And this is just sort of the relaxing of culture, is what I would say, right? So social media has turned everybody into a creator. It's brought the creative side out of everyone, and what that has kind of done effectively is kind of lowered the bar. People before that were making things had gone to design school and they were playing by very traditional rules, right? And now you've got, my cousin or my sister or my, whoever who has a thriving community on social media. They've got no background in making anything for the internet. They just kind of know what they like and they're creating it. So this is what we're becoming used to seeing more. When I look around, I just see this kind of across culture. A really great example, I think, is that it's sort of the impeccably crafted lyrics of Eminem versus mumble rap, right? It's like it used to be, he's doing this like compound syllable rhymes, that's Eminem, and now it's like some of the rappers aren't even finishing full words, but it's super catchy and it kind of doesn't matter. I saw this post recently about logos for car companies, right? And they took I think it was like 10 major car companies, and they showed the old logo and the new logo, and all of the old logos looked to be made out of metal and were super polished and looked like these like royal crests, And then the new version might be essentially the same shape, etc., but they were like hand drawings. They'd been completely stripped down. It looked like somebody was like pen and paper kind of drawing these out. So I think it's just this kind of relaxing of culture that we sort of see across the board. Because in the old world, in a lot of ways, I think that the number one flex was how elevated can you get? It's James Cameron making Titanic. On a cultural level, I think that when you see people making stuff, it's kind of like transparency is the new flex, which is why authenticity is so important. Yeah.
Yeah, I love those examples. It's so true. I mean, you can get into the nitty gritty of it from like the graphic design perspective and how brands should be including those iconic versions of the logos in advertising and all of that fun stuff. But I also love the example with the M&M rap example, because the coolest thing about what we do is that applies to every single industry, right? Like I always think about boxing. I'm a sports girl. I love sports. Boxing is the same. Think of the traditional culture that boxing has had, and now look at it with people like Jake Paul, which I get ripped on for at Jump because I love Jake Paul. But he's someone who's a great example who can take something that might be considered dying and revitalize it through things like TikTok and social media. And now it's, again, one of the most popular sports to watch, that and the UFC. So really any industry you're looking at, transparency, and again, with the storytelling, it's not the old world where people's content were movies like Titanic. Now you have this thing in your hand where you're following people like the Jake Pauls or the influencers, and it's a 24/7 journey. It's a story you're following all the time. So it just goes to show what you're competing against, how you can leverage that with the industry you're in. And it can apply to any industry, whether that's boxing or you're making lamps, You just got to be creative about how you're doing it.
Yeah, and I mean, even that point, it's like, we used to see these kind of small slices, television shows or celebrities' lives. You'd see the boxer when they walked into the arena, right? But now you're seeing sort of them before, you're seeing them after, you're seeing them go and like do a photo shoot with the Sherman tank that they're going to roll in with, Jake Paul. Those are more relaxed moments. It's the transparency. It's sort of like peeking behind the curtain, which is actually something that you see a lot of people do in marketing, which is kind of like a behind the scenes shoot. If you see a boom mic, if you see a camera, it's like it signals to our brains that like, oh, I'm seeing something that not everyone else is seeing, even though everyone else is seeing it. Yeah.
Definitely. It really just ties back to not wanting to limit yourself with the angles and styles you're running, because at the end of the day, creative production is key. If you're not making multiple different types of ad styles, you're just limiting who is going to engage and convert on your ad.
So let's talk about the power of creative testing. Yeah, because I think that you touched on this before. About how there's no sort of like catch all for like every ad that you've ever run. And I think to really put a point on that idea, what you're saying is there's kind of a disposable aspect to running ads on social media. The disposable nature of it is powerful because you can take a weird idea or an idea that's sort of out of the box, and you can do a micro test, and if it converts, great, it's going to grow, and you've unlocked something and you can scale. And if it doesn't work, right, nobody's going to see it because the algorithm isn't going to push it out to as many people, and then you're going to have this very small audience that even ever saw it, and then the buyers are going to sort of notice that and pull it off, and it's like it kind of never happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you work with smart buyers, they're going to pause the ad. They're not going to be running your money with something that isn't working, right? So
Right.
If you're struggling as a brand or as a marketer with getting people to kind of release some of this control and this fear that comes around a lot of this fun out of the box style testing, you can kind of go to that point. What's more valuable to you, the fear of someone being, oh, this is never gonna, this looks so off brand, or the knowledge you get from the data of whatever angle you tried, whatever hook you tried, seeing what was actually working and what wasn't, because you really don't know until you try.
So let's talk about some common things that we talk to brands about embracing, or how to find their voices on social media.
I think we talked a little bit about it, but I think leveraging other channels is something people miss all the time. So one of the things I always do with brands that come to us is I sit with our Google buyers, for example. I look at top search terms. I look at top videos that are on YouTube or things that are resonating on other channels to help direct me what we can start testing first on their main or preferred channels. And it also really helps when you're trying to expand. So say you're traditionally you've run on Facebook, or you've run on TikTok, and now you're trying to get into Snapchat. The same creative is not going to work on each platform. We see it time and time again where people will make a 9:16 video and slap it on Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube,
Right.
YouTube Shorts, and they just expect the same results. And again, it's just not the case. Different people are going to be using these platforms, just as I keep saying, different people will engage on different creative. So understanding what's going on in the rest of your digital space will help your strategy and drive that modular testing other places.
Absolutely. And I think that depending on the channels that you're running on, a great place to start if you're trying to develop your own sort of voice on social is explore those platforms. Explore not only the other people in your category that are running on those platforms and kind of what they're doing, but look for creators that are maybe in your same niche. Who do you like? What is the concept of the content, right? You don't have to run an ad just the same way that they're running a video, but maybe there's a larger concept that you can sort of take from them and try yourself.
I mean, it sounds so simple, but just what you said, make a mood board. There's so many resources that you can use to research, like the Facebook ads library, TikTok ads library, YouTube libraries, all of these things. Yeah. Get your competitors, type their names in, see what they're running. Put them all on a digital board. You can even use Canva. It's simple, it's cheap. You don't need to be an Adobe expert. There's so many different resources and tools, and look at them from a holistic perspective, right? It will show you the gaps in your market, and it will show you the opportunities you have. So this is always great for, as we go back to luxury brands, showing them what their competitors are doing, or more polished brands. You'll see a lot of times the gaps where user-generated content, you might be the only person doing it. that gives you an incredible advantage when you're talking about creative testing. So that's just a simple way to start. Make a mood board, see what they're doing, you know?
Also, for brands that are maybe shy about starting to test or are looking around and are just like feeling very fish out of water in terms of kind of like what they're seeing out there, I think that a great way to start is to look at your own social platforms. You know, if you have a social media team that's creating content and putting it on Instagram or, you know, wherever, are there ways that you can sort of leverage that content? Can you rerun it as an ad? Can you put a call to action on it? Can you put a headline on this? That's maybe like kind of a baby step in.
Yes, it's so simple and so easy. Just look at your reviews that you have. Even the Facebook comments that you have. A lot of times we'll have brands come to us and say, oh, well, we need to hide comments because people are, you know, X, Y, and Z, you know, disgruntled about this or this. That can be a really big thing for advertising. Using a negative angle and showing it in a positive review light is a fantastic way to do it. I think one of the most clever, funny ones I've seen was a coffee shop that used a billboard that they took a picture of for an ad that basically said, come try, you know, Karen J's worst cup of coffee she's ever had. Like some sort of ridiculous review that the coffee shop, obviously, you know, their quality coffee shop, they get, you know, the trashy review, they put it on a billboard, snap it with an iPhone, and all of a sudden you have thousands of people engaging, laughing at, just loving that brand, probably buying coffee online so they can try the worst cup of coffee Karen's ever had. You know, just fun angles like that you can take from your social proof.
Another sort of tactic that I've talked to a lot of people about is take one of your sort of more traditional ads that you would normally shoot and shoot it on a phone. Do it really quick with a creator. It could be the person talking to themselves. Test out the concept. You know, it's social media is our audience and it's our focus group.
It's so true. And once your eyes have been open to this, you'll see it everywhere. I swear, I recently switched to YouTube TV, and the types of ads I see on there that are, you know, high quality brand ads, but they're still trying to tap into traditional UGC tactics, but in a branded way. A lot of them for like, you know, medicine ads, you'll see retired people, they'll be holding up the cell phone and you see the branded cell phone with the ad playing in the phone just to say, hey, we get mobile. You're already seeing people do it in other areas, but what you're saying too, it doesn't have to be a huge production. Take your iPhone and do it yourself. That's what people are resonating with.
That is the relaxing of culture, right? And this is seems like maybe a nitpicky point, but I really want to make sure to touch on it. What font are you choosing to use in your ads? Serif, Arial, Helvetica. A lot of people are going to cringe when I say that because they want to stand out more than that. They want to be more specific in all of their creative choices. And honestly, as a creative person, as somebody who has come from a more traditional background of acting and writing and improv and all of these kinds of things, I get that too. I think that specificity is important and really cool when you can make it work for you. I think that for the landscape, for the environment of social media that we're talking about, when you put too much into something as small as a font choice, all it does is make it clear that you had a conversation about it. It doesn't make your headline disappear. It doesn't make me just ingest the message of your headline anymore. It makes me think about the font choice that you used in your headline. And so to sort of step away from that, don't be afraid to be basic in that way.
Yeah, I love that, Matt. It goes back to creative testing, right? For people who are worried about it, who spend hours on whether they use the sans serif or the serif font, do a creative test with your brand font and then take that same message and try it in a native style. See what it does for your brand. One of the most successful ads I ever ran was that test, taking a brand that really was focused on their fonts and taking that same message, doing a boomerang with a more simplified Instagram font, literally one you can make on your iPhone, and it was one of the most successful ads they've ever had. So just a simple way to do it, simple way to test, not taking away from the integrity of your brand. Again, the goal is to get them to your purchase point. So if that's your landing page where you have everything beautifully laid out with your brand fonts, that is the place you want to focus on, that, not your scroll and your feed.
It is a great test. I will say, I also think that a lot of people can waste a lot of time nitpicking about small tests like that. And I think that sometimes there's something to be said for just kind of like jumping in with both feet, trying something new, put the Helvetica on there and see how the ad does. Because I do think that those kinds of like really micro tests, it's like if you're trying to isolate just one element on your A/B test, and you only have a certain amount of ad dollars that you're going to be putting out there, you do have to think, is this the test that is most important to me? Or am I sort of willing to kind of like get a little bit looser on these guidelines? Am I willing to try some different aesthetics, some different fonts, some different, music, whatever it is?
It can feel overwhelming too, especially when you're talking about video. What variables should you be pulling apart to see is driving performance? And not to get too deep into creative testing, but that's something you can do. You can chain link test videos where you're actually time stamping sections of videos where you have your hooks, where you can manipulate your font choice like we just talked about, and then have your second chunks of content be your value points, your positive review, whatever else you're including in your video, and actually seeing what KPIs are being reported and where people are dropping off. And that can give you more information, right? So it might not be as simple as your font choice. It might be as simple as, hey, people aren't resonating with this positive review. Let's put our product value points first.
Yes. And if you're going to show a customer review, try making it look like a native platform. Try making it look like Google reviews. Try aesthetically making it look like a place where I'm used to seeing reviews. So I'm not thinking, oh, this is in brand colors and there's a logo right there and this is a review that this person obviously saw. Make it feel native to me. Make it feel the way that I'm used to feeling when I read reviews that I trust. I know that we're getting a little pressed for time here, but I didn't want to pass up on what is trending. Yeah. And I think that in just a sort of broad sense, what is trending, in my opinion, look at TikTok. I think that many of the trends are starting on TikTok and then sort of migrating across the platforms. If it's dances, if it's, pointing at headlines, whatever it is, you might see it start there. And then if you look on Instagram Reels, you might not see the same exact trends, but you're going to see a lot of the same ideas in the trends.
Absolutely. And I think, TikTok definitely, and then thinking who is making these trends, right? So when you think about TikTok and you're thinking about, like Gen Z and people who are creating trends like that, you want to think about humor. You want to think about not taking yourself so seriously. You want to think about irony. You want to think about all of the things that, the traditional advertisers, whether that be millennials or above, aren't usually comfortable doing because it's huge. A great example is that McDonald's Grimace shake. I don't know if you remember any of those TikTok ads where it was taking the most ridiculous concept of a McDonald's shake and having a trend focused around that. Now, how that applies to other ads, maybe not so much, but the point is taking something as small as a milkshake and how ridiculous you can make it. Not being afraid to have these out-of-the-box ideas because that's what TikTok is kind of promoting, right?
Absolutely. And Gemma, that's sort of a great place to for us to stop, I think, which is basically see something that you think is fun, see something that you think is funny or interesting, and give it a try. Try it for yourself, put it out there, and see what comes back to you. Because there is so much power in this creative testing. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we jump off here?
Yeah, I think we talked about a lot, but like you said, have fun with it. Everything doesn't have to be so serious. You can be really systematic with your strategy, but as long as you keep yourself open to testing, you'll find the people that you want to find and you'll get results, and learn and learn and learn.
Thanks, Gemma. If you are a company and are looking to hyperscale your growth through digital advertising, please get in touch with Jump 450 in the link below in the description. We'll see you next time.